think I hit her in the void.
I thought the void was BS.
No, we're definitely not finding that one.
Maybe you hit it in no man's land.
No, that was in the dead zone.
Today we're going to talk about the void within the whitetail's anatomy. It's a sacred spot below the spine and above the lungs where many deer hunters claim that you can hit and still miss the vitals. In today's video, we're going to dig into if the void is real or just a myth. Let's get into it. Jake Gaylord here from The Hunter's Advantage, and the void is a topic that has been around for as long as I can remember and has been called a number of different things. Some of the more popular names that's been around this theory has been names like the dead zone, no man's land, or what we use, the void. Between the three of us here, we have shot quite a few deer within our hunting journey, and a lot of those being on film. But with that being said, we have made some perfect shots, some marginal shots, and some flat out misses. But every once in a while, we ran into some incidents where we thought we made a great shot, but after the shot, things just didn't really add up. And what I mean by that is typically when you make a good shot on a deer, most of the time you expect that deer to act a certain way. Like after the shot, you hope you see a deer run away looking like he could tip over at any point if he doesn't go down within view, that is. Or while you're looking for that lovely tracking juice, you kind of hope to see just that runway, especially if you think you made a good shot. But what happens if that isn't the case? What could have happened during that shot? Before we get into if the void is real or just another myth, let's kind of talk about what the void supposedly is. So there are a lot of people that believe that the explanation to this anomaly is just basically a little pocket of nothingness tucked within the whitetail's chest cavity. If you haven't heard of the void before, it is believed to be just a spot below the spine and above the lungs, this little sliver right here. And rumor has it, if you pass an arrow or a bullet through that little sliver, then basically the shot is going to be non-lethal. And in the rare chance it does actually turn out to be lethal, the chances of you finding that deer are slim to none just because there won't be that good of a blood trail. And with the non-void theory, they believe that the whitetail's lungs take up all the free space within their chest cavity. And the anatomy would somewhat look like this. Obviously, same as the last diagram, you have the liver, the heart, and then you have the lungs. And there's no gap in between the lungs and the spine. A lot of people that disagree with the void theory say that even if there was a gap within the cavity, it would be almost impossible for someone to run an arrow or a bullet through that little gap without hitting anything lethal. Because if you go too high, then you hit the spine and are most likely going to get a follow-up shot. And if you go too low, then you hit lungs, which is a beautiful thing. But a good rebuttal would be that there are nearly 10 million deer hunters in the woods per year. And you would think that out of those 10 million, one would be unlucky enough to hit that void spot. And with me being the person that I am, if it wasn't for bad luck, I'd probably not have any luck at all. I think I might have had a run-in with the void a few years back. I had the biggest buck of my life at the time quartered away from me about 30 yards away. And I would have guaranteed you I hit this deer right behind the shoulder. And since it was quartered away a little bit, it didn't get a pass through and it stuck in the opposite shoulder. Anyways, it tried to take off running. It started tripping itself up, went into a ditch digger, got back up and ran off out of sight. And I sat back and thought that it was a done deal. Well, fast forward, I got down, looked around, and I couldn't find any of that lovely tracking juice, if you know what I mean, which led to no recovery. Now, it could have been something crazy where I only clipped one lung and it ran off and expired somewhere where I couldn't find it, or it could have been the void. Luckily for us, there are people way smarter than me that have taken the time to look into this theory. Brian Johnson of Wisconsin, who has been studying deer for well over 40 years, could have single-handedly ended this discussion. He mentioned how the majority of the archery magazines and even the veterinary community had a lot of the whitetail anatomy all wrong, especially the lungs and the spinal column. So what he did was he took all of his findings to the University of Minnesota and the University of Wisconsin to their veterinary departments, where he challenged their information, which he said that his information was proven to be true. On a deer and deer hunting video that they published in 2015, Brian Johnson actually brought a roadkill doe to an ATA show to give short seminars on why no man's land or the dead zone is false. For educational purposes, what he did was he stripped away all of the outer goods on one side of the doe to show everything basically from the rib cage in. And to make everything more realistic, he was able to pump the lungs full of air, which allowed people to see just exactly how everything fit. Brian stated one of the biggest misconceptions is that people think there is a dead zone between the bottom of the spine and the top of the lungs. But he shows when he inflates the lungs that they actually set up higher than the top of the backbone. Now, there was a couple people, including myself, that were questioning just how much air is typically supposed to go inside the lungs. And the reason I say that is because in Brian's demonstration, it looks like he fills the lungs basically to the max where they're about to explode. So do the lungs actually inflate that much? And what about the flip side? Could there possibly be a gap or a void whenever the deer exhales and the lungs deflate? So to dumb it down, from what I've gathered, the lungs stay relatively in the same spot within the rib cage. The difference in volume is not because the lungs get smaller inside the rib cage, it's because the rib cage internal volume gets smaller. So when the diaphragm does its thing, the rib cage moves. Therefore, there shouldn't be any gap within the chest cavity. So what about all these stories or videos of people hitting a deer where it should be lethal but never finding them? I would think the shot didn't hit the deer like they remembered it. What I mean by that is things happen super quick, and I feel like a lot of hunters, including myself, somewhat black out at moments before releasing an arrow, so they don't actually hit the deer like they remembered it. For example, we've had a few guys on our podcast that blood trail with dogs, and they said a lot of times if they're able to recover the deer, that most of the time the deer wasn't hit exactly where the hunter thought.
Like my interview process, I kind of go through a few different things. And one of my questions is I always send them I have a grid on a deer, and I always send them the question, where do you think you hit it? Not because, and normally they'll tell them, they'll give me an idea, and some of them are really good. Some of them, if we recover the deer, are way off, and I think what it comes down to is they're telling you what they wanted to see, because it was right behind the shoulder, and I'll tell a lot of people, well, if it's right behind the shoulder, you're not calling me. Right. So, but yeah, there's a lot of, you get them quartered away shots or quartered two shots, and or people don't realize how much they're quartering, and they think they had a better shot than what they actually did, and that's where all them clues come into play, because then it turns into, then I have to make the decision, and I'm not even the one that's there, what's hit, what's not hit, how long do we have to let this thing lay, stuff like that.
By filming our hunts, it has helped us realize just how quick a deer can react from the sound of your bow going off. A good example of this would be a couple doe Christian shot just this past season. If you've been following our content for any amount of time, you would know that Christian loves to anticipate the drop, meaning he just holds his pins slightly lower than the average Joe. And in the footage of both shots, you can see just how quickly the deer can hit the deck, and this was just at 20 yards. Thankfully, Christian did actually hold low, and he was able to punch both those tags. But what if Christian wasn't filming, and what if he wasn't holding low? He probably would have thought he smoked both of those deer, and if he wasn't able to recover them, it could have been pretty easy for him to say it was the void. Before doing this research, I fully believed the void was real, mainly because I didn't do my research and I was only basing it off of my own experiences. But now, knowing what I know, hopefully you and I both are a little bit more educated, and heck, maybe this will help us on down the line on where to aim on a deer and how to proceed when tracking one. But even with all that being said, I still kind of want to believe in the void. Whether that's just to have something to blame my lousy shot placement on, or just due to the fact that I have seen multiple trail cam pics of what looks like broadhead or bullet hole wounds on the side of deer where you would think would be fatal. So my question is the void real or is it fake? Let me know what you guys think. If you guys like this kind of content, be sure you give this video a like and hit that sub button. It doesn't cost you a thing, but it helps us out tremendously over here. And also, just throwing this out there, if you guys are looking to upgrade any of y'all's equipment this offseason, I strongly recommend you check out Out on a Limb Manufacturing. They're an Oklahoma-based company. They got some great guys working behind the curtains over there. And if you look and find something you like, be sure you use code HNTA10 for 10% off at checkout. Nonetheless, have a great day, and Jesus loves you.